My father was a drunk and a fiend. One night, he goes crazier than usual. My mother picks up a knife to defend herself. She doesn't like that. Not one bit. After he's done with her, he turns to me. Why so serious? All right, there we go. I gave it my best. I leaned into it as absolutely hard as I could. That was, years of absolutely no acting school and just my best mimicry going on there, guys. But
what are you talking about? That was perfect.
I feel like I feel like I kind of can channel a little bit of Heath when I need to, he's still my go-to Joker. I'm not going to lie. He's the guy I still think defines the role, even after watching, a somewhat spoiler. There's a deleted scene from the latest Batman out there that does involve a Joker. So you can look that up. It's a thing. You can YouTube it.
I apologize to our Jared Leto Joker fans out there. I'm
sorry.
I know that you thought this was a haven, but
all two of them.
Not.
Wait.
Yeah, one's Jared Leto. So
once Jared, when we get an angry letter to Jared Leto, which you can do. But yes, we are back here. We are down in the Steam tunnels. We have indeed reconvened for a very special episode, trying to hit the ground running. We have a guest. We have our guest who has been a guest before. So she is our first guest. She is our first returning guest, and she is our only guest so far. So she owns the podium. I'm just saying, she's got everything, absolutely owning it, listening to her own imagination. Miss Amelia Schwartzman, how you doing tonight?
Woo! Hey, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me back, guys.
Oh, we are so very happy to have you back. It is it's an honor and a privilege, and we are it's a fantastic thing, and we are so excited to have you.
I do question your judgment.
Well,
What was funny too? Last time I was on, you guys will probably remember, all of a sudden there was a storm outside and all the power in my house went out when we were right in the middle of the episode.
Yep.
And today we went out to dinner and we were coming back and there was a storm and I was like, oh my gosh, what if our power goes out because I'm on the steam gentleman tonight? So hopefully it won't, but I have a flashlight right behind my door just in case.
It's the steam. All right. Good on you for being prepared for the
I was gonna say, I won't say no.
Apparent steam gentleman curse, but good on you for at least, being prepared and being ready for that. But we wanted to have you back. Last time we were talking about ghost hunters in New England. It was October. It was your favorite spooky podcast. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to drop off the tagline. We had you on. We were talking about horror movies, but we also wanted to bring you back this time to go into another favorite subject of ours, and that being true crime. We have one episode in our past, call back out to it. I think we called it A Man for His Time, where we actually kind of went through serial killers or at least people who had
man for all ages.
Man for all ages. Thank you. RaShaun is always the one he's our librarian. He's the one who keeps all the records.
If I'm your librarian, we're all fucked.
Well, crazy on a ship of fools. That's what we call this shit. That's what we really should have called this show. Let's be honest here. But we had a little bit of a comparison to the various killers or sensational killers, I guess, of each age. So we kind of tried to look at it. We looked at Manson in the 60s. We looked I think we looked at Bundy in the 70s, Richard Ramirez in the 80s, and just kind of how they fit in with the zeitgeist of their time and how they kind of all, oddly enough, seem to sort of fit and be, it's unclear. Are they a product of their time, or did the time make them what they were? We really didn't have any answers for it, but it was just an interesting comparison in that regard. But you have a podcast. It is called Lost Souls of America, correct?
That's right. Yes. So Lost Souls of America, it's me and Jamie Day, who's a friend of mine who I actually met on ghost hunting in New England. And she kind of came to me with this vision she had for a show, kind of wanting to put it together. So we've been working together. We are at 21 episodes now. So it's always kind of big when you hit that number 20. And yeah, it's going well for us. We really like it. What kind of makes it different than a lot of other true crime shows is we focus on a lot of active cases and a lot of missing persons cases in Jane and John Doe's. So Janie's whole thing when she presented this to me was, I love true crime. I know you love true crime, but don't you ever feel like we're just consuming it so much and not really giving anything back, right? Like it's so violent, and these are real people with real families, and like we should be kind of doing something in return. So that's kind of our thing, is missing people. And I've always been really into activism of any kind, so it's just perfect for me. So that's what we're doing now.
Well, that's great. I listen to some, and hope there is a break in some of your cases, and that we can at least find some answers for sure, because it's hard work. I mean, I know there's a lot out there, and there's always a lot of stories that still go untold. So thank you for telling them, and thank you for bringing it out there for everybody. Let me just go around the room here just to refamiliarize you with the panel, as is the case here with our listeners. We do have with us the Three of Clubs himself, Mr. RaShaun Smith. How you doing tonight?
Doing well, sir. How are you? And how are you, Amelia?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be back here with you guys. It's always so fun to be here. So this is
Great to have you.
You're making us blush. You're making us feel great. But any thoughts that you brought out of the week with you? Any observations?
About true crime?
Oh, just about anything. I'm just waiting. It's my chance to check in with you, see what you've been up to.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack right now, and I really don't have a good answer. So I'm just gonna go ahead and say that I've been drinking, and call it. I'll go with that. I don't know.
Go with that. It's an observation. It's true. Don't worry. We're all seated behind a desk here, everybody. So we are safe podcasters. I promise you on that. We all have a designate, and we're gonna make it through the night. Okay. I love to play the role of teacher and put RaShaun on the spot in case, for those of you who are just joining us, maybe for the first time, that we hope. And then the other esteemed gentleman here joining us is the star child himself, Gregory RaShaun. What's going on with you today?
Pleasure to be back on here with Amelia. Hi, Amelia.
Hey.
And I'm feeling all right. I'm ready to do this. Ready to discuss the boundaries between reality and fiction, and how it can be insanely profitable.
And isn't it just, that's kind of, in truth, on a lighter note, a little less, less than the darker note that we're taking, of course, in our own take on it tonight. On a lighter note, if that didn't exist, we wouldn't be here. So let's take some moment for some thankfulness of that blurring of reality of between reality and fiction, and the profitability therein. Because if nothing else, most of the movies and television shows and comic books that we love to talk about on here wouldn't exist in the first place. So you gotta take a good with the bad, I guess, as it goes. But that is a good point. Well, bringing it back around a little bit, part of what I was thinking about, because listening to Amelia's show, and that, yes, she does do some great work on it and manage to combine it with activism. But I wanted to invite you on just because I think a lot about true crime. It is certainly a genre that I like, I enjoy. And then sometimes I do even wonder why I enjoy it so much. And it does have a strange rubric. It has that strange area, the Venn diagram, where things go across, where you have fictional, you have true crime, you have missing person, you have sensationalized true crime, that all kind of come together in that strange space, and where it occupies. Starts, I guess officially they started with Truman Capote, right? Writing In Cold Blood, is at least he's given credit to start the genre and the idea. And it's the 60s, and it's somewhat interesting him writing such a book and such an exploration of what happens in this small town murder that totally upends everyone's expectations, and really it exposes a real dark underbelly to America, right? At least it's the first time someone's writing about it and saying, well, these things happen too. And that, and sometimes they happen for no reason and it can't really be understood or explored. And then slowly through the years has grown into such an industry, such a genre. You don't even know if it's both those words really encompass it. Also, as we were talking a little bit before the show, it is an industry that I think I think overall for the better is very well represented by women. There's a lot of women in the space, a lot of famous women now in the space, working, podcasting, writing, talking about it. But the tough crux of it is that there is also, it is undeniably a genre with a lot of violence towards women. And it was as being part of not even the subtext, it's the text that comes up. So I kind of wanted to have you on to just sort of talk about your thoughts on it, how you got into the genre, Amelia, and what do you think about it? What do you think of the future of it? I think you've taken your own take, as you say, with your activism, but kind of wanted to, and being able, as I say, to tell people stories, right? And to really try and keep cold cases out in the fore and maybe bring some new information to bear. So tell us a little bit about yourself in this space and how you came to it and what was going on there.
Sure. So I've always been really into true crime. I grew up very sheltered. I lived, in a suburban Baptist household. I wasn't allowed to watch a lot of TV, but my cousins were allowed to watch whatever they wanted. So I'd be like 10, 11, 12, 13, going down the Cape to my cousins, and we'd be watching all these serial killer documentaries. And it really freaked me out. I also was a very shy child and very nervous about everything going on around me, especially because, I was kind of sheltered and was told you have to be careful. So I think that's kind of how I got into it, right? So then I kind of got into things. And I think the reason women are so involved in like the viewership of it and the telling of the stories, I think it's a few different reasons. These are my opinions, but I think there's two or three really main reasons. The first is that, as you pointed out, we are much more likely to be victims. So it's part educating yourself. It's part telling these stories to educate other women. It's part telling these stories to take back some of the power and to feel a certain way about it. You know what I mean? Like you're more in control. You're able to teach younger women to be careful. You're able to teach people to watch out for these signs, watch out for these red flags around you. Because before, especially when I was a little girl in the 90s, you'd be told like, well, don't dress a certain way. Don't do these certain things. You're so much more likely to be killed by someone you know than someone who just thinks you're pretty on the street. Is so much more likely. You're so much more likely to be killed by your husband than anyone else in your life. So how do we kind of look at these things? There's also this really interesting psychological aspect to it that for some reason, women do seem very drawn to, especially abnormal psychology. I think we naturally just want to figure out what's going on in people's head, especially because this is all happening now at a time where women are even more in the workforce or doing other things or having to interact with people more in a way we never really had to 30, 40, 50 years ago. So I think psychology comes up more and more because now we're in these new zones, in zones that like our moms couldn't really always tell us about, right? Because like my mom, she worked, but she wasn't a business owner, she wasn't in the food industry, which is like a male driven, so you kind of have to figure these things out on your own. I think, I lost my thought. Oh, I got it back. So I think that those are really the big things. It's a lot of just being careful. It's a lot of telling other people how to be careful. It's a lot of, I hope this never happens to me. And then there's the adrenaline rush, right? You get this, you're watching it, your heart's racing. It's like a horror movie, but it's real. And what's scarier than that? When you look at these people and you can put yourself in that this could happen to me and seeing these people get abducted and things like that. And your heart's just going. I mean, I love jumping out of airplanes. I love it. It's one of my favorite things to do. But I get that same rush sometimes when I watch these. And it's not the same way as when you're watching like a psychological thriller. It's not the same as when you're watching a horror movie, because this really happened and it could happen to you.
I think that's, well, it brings up a lot of good points. Have you, out of curiosity, and I'm kind of I'm throwing you a little bit of a curveball here. Have you seen the documentary that they did on Ted Bundy that was centered around it was from the point of view of his girlfriend, the longtime girlfriend, and her daughter? Have you ever seen that? It's out on Amazon. I'm trying to remember its name off the top of my head.
I've seen so many on Ted Bundy, but I don't think I've seen that one.
I think I recommend it, but just when you were talking, everything you were saying about was very interesting, because I remember watching that documentary, and I was born in 74, so I was young when he was active, and I had memories of him being caught and executed, and on the whole true crime pop culture. I remember a television film called it was made for TV. When I say television film, made for TV, kids, they used to just do that, and they didn't call it Netflix. It was a big deal.
It was a thing. Yeah,
it was a thing, and it was considered a little cheaper than a quote unquote real movie. It starred Mark Harmon, called The Deliberate Stranger, all about what happened with Bundy. But the thing that struck me, and it was interesting hearing you talk, is I really remembered my mother, because she was the age of his girlfriend at that time, and she was at the crux of that. She was on her second marriage, ended up having 5, but she was on that, and there was all these things happening, and his girlfriend was talking a lot about what was happening around the university where she worked out in Seattle, and just how the women's movement at that time, called women's liberation, was taking hold, and all of those things that were kind of coalescing around this time when he was out in his prime and hunting, and how all of the strange and conflicted feelings she had, of course, being with him during that time, and being the one that he didn't kill, even though she thoroughly knows and thoroughly believes it. So that was a very interesting experience watching that, and just really even having a kind of strange empathy for my mother and what she was going through during that time. And watching that, I thought was just such a well done documentary, because I thought of my mother and I thought of my sisters, and I thought that was a really great way to approach the subject, and just a different way to approach it, and what you thought about. But in the midst of all that, it was the strangest thing, because Bundy is that example of everything you're told about the crazy guy on the street. Your excellent point you made about how you're so much more likely to be by someone you know. Now, he did hunt strangers, but he was able to because, well, quote unquote, he was handsome. He didn't look like a serial killer, right? He could kind of come in and say, for all the reasons, and we know, we even went over it on our last episode about just I believe
I described him as milk toast. Thank you.
Yes.
if you want to call that handsome, go ahead. But
that was it. But there was that idea of people who had come forth and sort of said, well, he just looks like a regular guy, right, quote unquote, or I've or
question is, who's regular?
There is always that, exactly. And how it goes. Well, with that, I want to kick it over to you there, RaShaun. I want to get your thoughts there. Put you on the spot for your book report tonight.
Yeah, I brought that to myself, considering I was over here just talking shit while the teacher was going on and on and on and on, and I appreciate it. True crime to me has always been a very interesting thing for a lot of reasons. I totally understand what Amelia was saying, and as much as a cis male can, I can empathize for a number of reasons. One being is like the intersectionality between things like true crime stories. Like I just watched I think it was like The Worst Neighbor or Worst Roommate Ever, and the first episode was about some old lady who offed like 9 people. Or another Netflix apparently is trying to corner the market on all these things.
That's what they do now.
and talking about the algorithm, what does it say about humanity that we're all down for it, right? But going even to like the Cecil or Cecil Hotel, and sort of the fantasism and sort of otherworldly elements to things like this. So I think as far as human nature, it's no different than rubbernecking on a car wreck. It's horrible. It's awful. It's things that you really don't want to actually see. I think if any of us have ever seen an actual dead body, it is not something that just goes away. You immediately know that is not special effects that you're looking at, and it burns an image in your soul in the same way that staring at the sun burns an image in your retina. It's not a fun thing. Matter of fact, I think we all probably know people who have unfortunately served time in the military in wartime conflict. I've myself spoken to a few different individuals, one being from Vietnam. He actually even had a book, which was kind of freaky. Um, However, the way he talked about it was very clear that the man was talking about something that took part of his soul to even know about it, to even witness it. So I think sadly that is ingrained in all of us, that we still have this weird rubbernecking reaction to these stories. We want to slow down and kind of crane our neck and see if maybe we can get a few details that will maybe stick with us and make us think about things, maybe our mortality or maybe how awful things can be, blah blah blah. But that's how true crimes kind of hits me in one element. But then the other element and why I tend to find them a little bit more on the entertaining side than I probably should is because coming from the intersectionality of, as I often talk about, being from a Black African American culture and heritage of the United States, I grew up where true crime, the reality was things like, as Miss Billie Holiday sang about way back in the early 1900s or 20th century, sorry, Strange Fruit. What she was talking about was, in fact, the bodies that would swing from the southern trees after public lynchings. These lynchings were at times almost so publicized that you almost got a coupon if you showed up for these things. There's well documented photos and things like that. So the true crime stories that kind of rang through my family and families similar to mine were what Billie Holiday was talking about, which were very true. It happened so much so that it was to the point that it was almost a sport and below the Bible Belt for at least a good amount of Jim Crow. So true crime has a weird thing that kind of kicks in when you look at it, when you come to elements like that. So by the time you get to a 77-year-old woman who's often her roommates because she's collecting pension money, um, and I mean that is some freaky shit right there. Or as Amelia said, individuals who prey on those who they deem quote unquote weaker and in compromised positions where they don't really have a lot to look at. Unfortunately, it tends, I think, to be for all of us. It kind of comes down to um, these rubbernecking moments where we slow down, we try to look at it, we pay attention to it, we gawk, we awe, we talk about it later, we create rumors. I mean, the Cecil Hotel, it got to the point where it was nearly mythicized to what happened to the poor woman who died in the central part of the story, even as the story was glossing over other people who had died in mysterious ways throughout that entire hotel and continue to. It's a very strange but interesting and telling element of humanity, and it goes to something that I actually brought up to Greg a few times as we've worked on different projects, that humanity sadly is the byproduct of the worst of humanity, not the best of humanity. We descended from clans that were willing to do whatever they wanted to do or could do to win, not the clans who were the virtuous and the altruistic and the ones who would not do the worst thing ever to beat the clans. And I think when we watch things like true crime, it's a hallmark to that sort of shared gene and or hereditary trait in all of us, that we all kind of came from some pretty vile individuals, and we find a weird entertainment in all of this.
Well, maybe, yeah, that weird entertainment that way, in a frightening way, there's a relation. Who knows, right? That this sort of just that wondering, that wondering what if. How is Taking it back to you for a second, Amelia? How is it? How has it been for you since really officially working in the space? When you've been podcasting and what now that you're out there looking for missing people, has the genre changed for you? How has it affected you?
Yeah, it's really sad. Honestly, I was, especially because I'm so used to coming from ghost hunting in New England, which is so silly and funny and like goofy. And like we're talking about ghosts. And like I guess in a certain way, like you're still talking about dead people, but they're from like hundreds of years ago. And you're talking about like aliens and silly stuff. And like me and my cousin are very funny. And Jamie's also very funny. But then we come to this space where it's so serious and you have to take it so seriously. And a lot of times you're talking about missing children and it just breaks your heart. So I'd say when we're done recording, I usually like do some breath work and like try to come like back into myself. And I would also say I'm probably more cautious when I go out. I know that one day when I have children, I'm going to be the biggest helicopter parent in the world, which I probably was already going to do, but now it's like a little more. Um, but yeah, and as you were talking, RaShaun, I was also thinking about when you're talking about rubbernecking, when you're watching these shows, especially like Investigation Discovery, there's so much drama that goes into all of it. It's so much. So like you're not even just drawn into like the facts of the case, but you're drawn into hearing the family speak about these people and speak about what happened and what they now see looking back, hindsight's 2020. And there's just it's so emotional, right, when you're doing this work. And like you said, Josh, a lot of these cases we've covered, not really because of us, but just because of general media hype and whatever. A lot of them are really close to being solved, especially some of the Jane Doe cases, some of them even from the 90s. So I think it's important, and it kind of gives me hope as we're doing this, that people are kind of more involved, especially there's a big thing right now. I know Jamie's very involved with it, with people who go missing on the Appalachian trails. And a lot of people go missing there and their bodies are found and they are not identified. And it's so heartbreaking to think about in this day and age where people are so connected, right? Like we're all so connected. Like we're all in 4 different places looking at each other on video screens right now. Like we're able to connect this way. Like, Instagram, I have like some followers, you know what I mean? We're connected constantly. I'm able to talk to my friends from college just via text all the time. And that people can just go for a hike and die and no one knows who they are. And they're on newspapers and it's all over Facebook and no one knows who these people are. And it's so scary. And it makes you think about how small we all are in this huge world.
It is interesting. I've listened to your podcast. I have listened to others that I would say are in your genre, for lack of a better term, or sub genre, if you will, missing persons and things. Listen to Up and Vanished, Payne Lindsay. His first season was kind of famous because he actually the team actually helped solve the case. Well, that's hard to do. Don't hear about that too often. To Live and Die in L.A. There was one. They did two. He did 2 seasons. A journalist out there, and he I think like it was interesting. It was kind of strange. He did his second season. He actually presented first. I think he had more information and sort of got some resolution out of it. But do you find now that you're working from that space, do you still have an interest in the more quote unquote traditional true crime, or is that just not? Is that something is that a little harder to watch, or do you still find yourself watching Investigation Discovery sometimes?
I do find myself watching it, and it drives my husband crazy because he does not love that it's on TV all the time. But he's always like, enough with the murder. But but no, I still watch it. I will say one thing for sure is I'm definitely more conscious of how things are presented, and I'm more conscious of these people. And I feel like it's a real issue with podcasters, and it's a real issue with social media accounts that focus on true crime, is a lot of people do it for like ratings, clout chasing, like things like that. You know, it stops being, this is who this person was and this is why they mattered. And it's more about, here's a story I really like. And those are very, very, very different. So I think I'm more cognizant now of what shows and programs are really focusing on the people and on the actual crime, on the psychology of why the person did it, because it's usually not super black and white, and there's a lot of stuff behind there. And who it's just like kind of like, oh, look at me, this is what I'm doing today. Like, I'm here to talk about this. You know, it's a very, until you're really doing it, you don't notice it as much, and then it becomes very clear.
Well, 100%, because if people wanted straightforward, as you put it, black and white stories about, for the most part, unsolved murders or missing people, frankly, they can just watch A&E's First 48. Most of those cases do not get solved, and they're very upfront with it. As much as you want to take it as, reality TV or whatever. The other 2 points I would love to just kind of end with would be that, as Amelia has pointed out, with a lot of these stories being about people's, families, that when I brought up the strange fruit, that happened for a lot of people. A lot of people did not know what happened to their brother, their sister, their uncle, their whomever, because they just were found, in some cases, it could have been a sundown town, where they were unfortunately in a place where literally the sun went down faster than they expected. And that was enough for them to get killed and go missing, or frankly, just walking down the wrong street. So I think there's a lot of that still kind of happens throughout this world and throughout this country, that it leads to a lot of these stories. And frankly, because of that, it allows for the myopia of not looking in the direction of these individuals that allow them to go missing, and to not be cared about. I think we all can agree that definitely the trans community right now is probably the most in harm's way as far as like lack of visibility. And then the last thing I will add is, still part of me believes that human beings only see like 1% of what really exists in existence. And there's some weird, kind of crazy things out there that we just cannot explain. And unfortunately, that interacts with our vitality. And I don't know. Sometimes I just kind of believe that there's things that we just do not know.
Well, with that, actually, then the professor here. You talked about the professor, but we got the real PhD who's been hanging back and watching us all talk here. But I do want to get the Star Child.
It's been excellent.
Oh well, we let, that's high praise coming from our resident scholar here. But we do want to hear from you, Greg. We do want to hear what the Star Child has to add to our little panel discussion tonight on the true crime genre, spoonerisms not aside.
I mean, piece of advice: do not watch a documentary of any kind with me. Like, it doesn't matter if it's got fucking Attenborough in it or not. Like, just don't watch a documentary with me, because I just can't shut up. Like, a lot of documentaries, they just send my mind going in so many different directions. Like, I don't believe in documentaries that just tell the story. Like, everything goes into an editing room and everything gets filtered. And so I am looking for what they want me to feel when I look at this. Like, do they want me to feel like this was an injustice, or do they want me to, kind of feel in between about good and evil, or maybe put the microscope on some crack in our society. Like what are they trying to do, and how are they packaging it? Like, is this supposed to be humorous? Like, a lot of people thought Tiger King was hilarious. Like, they really packaged these people as being uh, um, just a bunch of lovable scamps. I saw them as a bunch of dangerous sociopaths, but that's what I thought was actually fascinating about that documentary, was how you can take this group of people who are dangerous sociopaths and make them hilarious. And maybe that's the magic of the editing room. But when I watched serial killers at my age, they were everywhere. They were like Big Bird and Hugh Hefner. Like, you just went around, like, there they were. Like, there was always a new serial killer, and you were hearing about past serial killers. And at that time, now again, because when we have this conversation, I feel like, truths, the reason that you're always going to have this genre and you're always going to be able to make more and more documentaries is because that's the truth that can be examined at that time. And every time there's a new documentary, you can take it from a completely different angle, depending on the truth that at that period and the values that people are willing to look at that, quote, truth now. And so back then they were just evil. They were Satan. People packaged them as Satan. People packaged Charles Manson as Satan. Richard Ramirez as the son of Satan. They made it a point to make sure that they pushed that in your face as much as possible. Them and poor Ozzy Osbourne got caught into the whole mix. It was awful. But then, with the explosion of media, and with Nixon, suddenly the face of evil and these crime documentaries, because don't forget, there are a lot of political true crime documentaries. My personal favorite, Fog of War, see it. It's damn near everything you really need to know about human nature and the history of the United States. But in the light of Reagan, in the light of the 9/11 hijackers, I mean, my God, what did you have to do that Tuesday morning? Like, you'll never forget where you were. But the 9/11 hijackers, I mean, don't forget, these were, for the most part, middle class men, with quite a bit to live for. But that passion, that drove them to do that, that fanaticism that gets somebody to say, yes, strap a bomb to me, I will do this, you simply do not see in the serial killer. And that's what I think is the new package. That's why I think it made room, because people had to look at this kind of conservative fanaticism that we're seeing, this religious fanaticism that we're seeing. Religion, conservatism, these are our friends, right? So it's kind of those pillars of your society also weakening, that makes you want to take a look at these other evils that have happened in the past. And what do you find out more often than not? These serial killers are some serious sad sacks that fell through the cracks. And you can use their stories, most of their stories, to point out some issue in our society if you really wanted to. Definitely sexism and violence toward women, because, don't forget, even in the wild, predators kill the babies, and it's important, like these men, and I'm going to say men. I mean, yes, Delphine Lalaurie and Eileen Wuornos did happen, but I mean, let's be honest here. We're talking about 1,000-to-1 ratio. Men. We're saying men. And that is important, but not just that, but what is it that a Charles Manson or that John Wayne Gacy says about our society, and what it is that we want from it? So when I'm watching these documentaries, and there are so many of them now, good luck trying to watch them all. That's the thing. Good luck, seriously. That's the thing that hits me the most. Like, they're repackaging, someone that I was told through my entire childhood, this was a waste of a human being. Throw them away. There's nothing else to look at with Jeffrey Dahmer but evil. But then you look into Jeffrey Dahmer's story and you're like, how did this young man How did this young man, people want to answer that question. How did this young man, who was a middle-class guy from Wisconsin, right? You know, how did he fall through the cracks? Can my child be the next Jeffrey Dahmer? You know, and it becomes a whole other game when you let it kind of do this to your mind. For the most part, you know, you can watch, say, you know, the Wild Wild Country, and put your mind, honestly, yeah, you know, like watch Wild Wild Country again. If you haven't seen it, absolutely amazing.
Great documentary. A lot of fun to watch.
Absolutely great documentary. I mean, that in itself shows the dynamic of a part of this country and the way they're showing it now, but they make it a point to go back then and show how this was packaged. And it all came down to the packaging. And I think the more details in another generation, you'll be able to make another set of documentaries about all of these subjects. I mean, I don't know how much further you can get into, say, you know, the Iceman, but it again depends on what it is they want to say with that one particular documentary. So, I mean, truth has always been stranger than fiction already.
I think
And the fact that it's
Kuklinski's
true just makes it that much better for us.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think Kuklinski's had like 3 or 4 documentaries on him. I mean, he is
documentaries, movies,
but where
60
he's
Minutes,
talking to
2020.
where he's directly talking to the camera. He likes to talk. That is
Oh, yeah.
abundantly clear. He is.
I mean, you
know.
don't get the nickname Iceman by accident. I mean, come on, let's be real. There's a little more vanity to this man than we give him credit for.
Oh, I think quite a bit. As I say, he loves the camera without a doubt. But go on, Greg. Didn't mean to break your flow up too much.
Oh no, that was basically me wrapping it up. Like, I think that the reason I'm really into it is because having done it when I was a kid, you know, again, these serial killers, these crooked politicians, and then taking it a step further to, you know, the mass shooters and the terrorists and the QAnons. I'm dying to see how they're going to repackage the truth. Because even the true crime documentaries where they look at cold cases, oh my God, you almost wish it was racism, because the incompetence, like the unbelievable incompetence of these police officers is terrifying. And it will absolutely make you lose faith in the idea that you are protected by the police in any form or fashion. You're not. If there's not video footage, that guy's walking. I mean, if it wasn't your husband and there's not video footage, that guy's walking. There it is. It's pretty much that simple. So I think I'm on board because I want to see how people are going to repackage Manson.
Yeah.
Well, isn't that really the case in the point right there, in the sense that we watch these things because we really want to believe that we aren't the monsters. We watch these things with a very clear point of view, and it normally involves us putting ourselves in the shoes of individuals that a lot of ways we shouldn't be able to. But then, you know, when you look at or you read or you examine, or as Amelia does, you know, actually investigate and do more than what we do and just show up 5 minutes before and be like, hey, what are we talking about? But actually know the subject. A lot of times these individuals are following a type of normal routine that isn't that so much foreign to your own, to the point where it's like, you watch these things because you almost have to convince yourself, you have to believe even that you aren't in fact the monster, when more often than not you are watching just a facsimile of yourself, just the person who took a left and when you took a right, the person who slowed down when you sped up, the person who took the call when you decide to ignore it. We're all those animals.
I think to put my 2 cents worth in here, I started the show with my Heath Ledger impression, and I did it because.
Hey, sorry. By the way, you know why he did that?
Why did he do that?
Because the prosthetic that they fixed for his Joker face kept falling, so he would have to do that sucking motion with his mouth to keep it from falling down. That is what gave us the iconic Joker tick from
lisp,
Heath
if
Ledger.
you will. Yeah. Okay.
Wow.
Well,
And now we know.
And now we know. I mean, I
And
love
now we
the,
know.
I love the movie.
And by the way,
stories.
if we're going to compare you to Heath Ledger, it's obviously 10 things I hate about you, Heath Ledger. I mean, let's be clear about, let's be clear about who we are and how we do things.
I should be so lucky. I mean, again, also, if my high school experience was anywhere close to that, it was not.
You had chain wallet. It's okay. We know.
I think I was pre-chain. I think I missed chain. Like, I was born in between chain wallet and satchel, as
Did you
they
have
call
your
it.
hair into Chad Kroger mushroom wave?
Okay, so I grew it to a I grew it to a ponytail because
of course you had a ponytail.
Cool.
Of course you had a ponytail
because I thought I looked cool. I did not look cool. But at the risk, of sounding, well, the risk of virtue signaling, I'm glad for Amelia being in the true crime space, because when I was thinking about it and how I opened up the episode with Heath Ledger, I felt that Heath kind of tried to play that role from this idea of our sociopath, our psychopath, and really actually tried to make the role genuinely scary for the first time. And I did get goosebumps from that performance, because I thought he just brought that idea, at least in our head, of what we had. Now, where we get that from is from a series of these ideas from pop culture, right? Not necessarily from the reality. This goes back to that idea. I first I'd say I became aware of even that idea of true crime after Silence of the Lambs, right? Hopkins brings that performance. Later on, I go back and I see Brian Cox's very fine performance. So just got to throw that out there. Go see the original Manhunter, the De Laurentiis version there. It was Michael Mann directing it, and the original performance, very well done. But we have this performance again that really disturbed me, that Hopkins just hits on something, on again our idea of what this person is, right? He gives this boogeyman like performance, but in that sense that he still looks so normal behind that glass, right? When they really got me with it was when they're bringing her in, her being Jodie Foster's character, Clarice Starling, when he's giving her the briefing, right? That's when it really, my palms started to sweat in that movie theater, right? Because he's saying, don't pass anything through the glass, don't do that, right? All these things, right? We brought him out for this one, this one medical exam, and this is what this is what her face looked like after he was done, and his heart rate never got above 95, even when he swallowed her tongue, right? It's just this cartoonish. There's a part of you that believes that a person like that can exist. Then I kind of get, and I do listen to some real true crime, and I find out about people like Albert Fish. All right, and suddenly you realize that there was some truth to what is presented on screen, at least in the acts. And I can't. I don't know if I can't help, but I find myself being totally fascinated by these characters of just like, wow, this really does exist, right? And it's, I have this image of it brought to me by pop culture of this Hannibal Lecter. A lot of our listeners may not know about Albert Fish. I won't go into every gory detail. I will say that the man used to eat his own shit, and that is the most socially acceptable thing the man ever did. Right? And I can say that 100% truthfully. I'm not making any of that up. I'm not being the slightest bit hyperbolic when I say that this was the most, he did it, and it was absolutely the most socially acceptable thing.
Well, his mustache was very, very on point.
Very on point for the time. Also in the way that he used to write letters. The thing that I almost start dying laughing when I talk about him. He used the social media of his day. Nowadays we would have probably seen him on Tinder or on, out there on TikTok doing something. But he used to write these longhand form letters to women, just to be as
Reddit.
as gross. Yeah, I read it. Good point. Just
Definitely
to be
Reddit.
as explicit and as gross as he could, but he'd take his time with it, and he would have to sort of warm them up to the subject. But what's hilarious is he's still kind of using the vernacular of the day, because he was deep into B&D and S&M, though I don't know if he would have called it that, but he would just sort of say, you know, you have to do this to me. And he would, talk, and these women would, of course, were getting these letters and were corresponding. He was promising usually to be a boarder in their house and say, well, I'm going to come and I'm going to give you X amount of dollars and I'll do this and you have to take care of it. It is truly wild, right?
So bad vegan?
Not quite bad vegan. No, like way further out. No, that guy.
It's bad vegan in the 1800s, man. I mean, you're talking about social media and writing letters. I mean, you can give me a little leeway.
I think he would have. I think if he had promised anyone's dog immortality, again, would have been far more socially acceptable than the roads he was.
You didn't read those letters,
but we can read them out loud. But I think bringing it back to what you're doing with it now, Amelia, I'm glad that there is a space in there where it kind of gets the redeeming quality again, because I admit that first introduction is being brought into this almost superhero, not even hero, super villain, type comparison, right? Where I start with the Joker and I go there and seeing that and this idea of it, but at least then that there is a space out there again that does remind me that there are humans behind it, that there are humans behind it perpetrating, but also that are the victims of men like this. So it's good that you're out there. So I thank you for doing what you're doing. As I say, at the risk of sounding like I'm over virtue signaling, because I've always found it somewhat of a fascinating genre and particularly because, as I say, to have been presented almost with a cartoonish version of it, to have found that any of it ever happened in anywhere in history astounds me. But again, taking it back to RaShaun's point, if you really read history, I shouldn't be astounded, right? I should be. It's really living in the space where it's the exception and not the rule. That maybe that's the most sobering part about the genre as a whole.
I like the point that you made about that other generation with Albert Fish, but that generation of serial killers. It is hard to put into words some of the things that that group. I mentioned Delphine Lalaurie, another one, and one of the few women again, but it's hard. It's hard. It's an event. It's a series of events that if you can tell them without reacting, it says more about you.
I think it's tough to do it. I think one of the podcasters I listen to puts in a lot of comedy, and I know that's kind of frightening, but I think he has to, because when he goes into it, it's so bizarre, it's so frightening that with his name is Dan Cummins. He does a show called Time Suck, with Albert Fish. Like he joked about a line about where he was trying to lure a woman into just his overall web. He would talk about, I'm from Hollywood, and this is how they do it in Hollywood. He'd say, showbiz, that's how they do it in Hollywood. That's that became this moniker that he gave this guy, because he was it's so macabre, it's so cartoonish and so over the top. And then even in his case, you juxtaposition it with the fact that he was in the late 1800s, early 1900s in this Victorian repressed society where you don't expect anyone to be doing any of this and perpetrating any of this. Even at that point, you just did, it seemed even marriage was a futile act, because you weren't even supposed to procreate. Like, sex was so repressed, you couldn't even do it for procreation. So what was even the point there? But it is fascinating to me, as I say, that maybe it comes from coming out of a clan mentality into a more orderly, quote unquote, orderly society, and that, and what was once considered acceptable behavior becomes the aberrant behavior. I don't know, but definitely getting way above my pay grade here, without a doubt.
Well, isn't that the irony, in the sense that we throughout history know of multiple figures who have committed genocide, personally committed genocide, yet however we get caught up in individuals who do horrific acts but on an individual basis. Think about if we're talking about juxtaposition, talk about how the mind can actually do that. You understand that one person over here in history murdered thousands, if not millions of people, some cases by their own hand, yet we will absolutely gaw and gasp and every single time we hear about one person who, horrifically, but murdered like 6 or 7 people, maybe even 12. But still, it's like, I'm not the best at math. I did get a C+ in 7th grade, so I'm sort of like a genius, right? I'm sort of like a genius. So
C's get degrees, man.
I'm willing to bet that you don't get to genocide by the few numbers that we have. So once again, I think it speaks more to the fact that we have that disconnect when we talk about numbers, and when the stories start becoming so small that you can become specific, and you become personal, and you become targeted, and you can really dig in, as Amelia said, the humanity behind it. You at this point, it's no longer a number that you're reading about. It's an individual who has families. And this also is where I would point out with historical connections, in the sense of depending on where you're coming from. And as Amelia pointed out, being a woman, and as I'm pointing out, being a Black individual, you're coming from an interesting intersection of that history where, like, hey, by the way, that's kind of happened, even when it didn't make it to your stories of these sort of Pulp Fiction like qualities that we like to center around and treat like campfire stories.
Well, Amelia, God bless you. You came back again. You came back to visit us.
Thank you guys so much for having me on. I always feel I always feel like at the end of talking about true crime like this, like there's always kind of that feeling of like, oh, like people stink. You know what I mean? Like, that's one thing I say on the show a lot is like, the world is such a like gorgeous, beautiful place with like so much positivity and so much beauty. And you get into true crime, and like when you really think about it, you're like, oh, sometimes it makes it like hard to see the flowers,
Well, actually, I'm gonna thank you, because you tied it all together with a 7 thought there at the end of it, right there, just to and tied our subject together and everything. So you were our Morgan Freeman tonight. So well done.
Thank you.
You can be Morgan.
Yeah. Oh, always be Morgan. Come on.
When I see, I don't know if I get so much down about that. I mean, I feel closer to my species after watching certain documentaries, I have to say, because I mean, you don't really know someone until you know what's wrong with them, and you have to be able to accept, more than just the pleasant things. Like if you're just accepting the pleasant things, then you're only accepting about a quarter of the person. And so if you're accepting only the pleasant things about our species, you're not accepting everything about the species. And genocide's tricky, because genocide, it depends on who the genocide is against and who's committing it. I mean, if we're going to be honest, then you could say, oh well, doesn't that actually make it worse? It's like, no, because if you were part of the party that committed the genocide, you're going to need that. You're going to need that in order to deal with.
What about that?
What?
What about the other side? The side that's getting genocide, how they feel?
Well, you don't want to ask the people that are committing the genocide. And so you definitely will get a different answer from the people who the genocide is being committed, who are the victims of the genocide.
I just want to say,
then you're going to have that issue, like good and evil becomes so relative. It becomes a question of necessity. It becomes
people have a bad habit of not wanting to be murdered.
Was that?
There is that.
People have a bad habit of not wanting to be murdered. I mean, the gall.
I just want to say that we've had 2 t-shirt slogans tonight. One from Amelia of "Enough with the murder." I like that. I just think I could see that. I could see the legend on that. And Greg, I'll give you the credit on it. The Star Child, genocide is tricky, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Right? These are definitely, these are definitely
if you're going to think of it,
opportunities.
Yeah, like if you're going to think about it, it does make things more complex, but again, you're not going to be able to really understand our species until you accept that part of us and part of our history.
Well, Amelia, I want to thank you for coming back on with us. We really do try and get, believe it or not, this is our best behavior. So
we were doing so good.
Well, thank you guys so much for inviting me back. It's always fun hanging out with you.
I honestly can't believe you came back, so thank you.
we love it. We're so happy to have you here. Please listen to her show. It was shows plural, Lost Souls of America and Ghost Hunting in New England. Both
Your
great
favorite
shows.
Spooky podcast.
That's it. Oh, love it. Love the tagline. It absolutely makes it go. And while you're listening to all these wonderful podcasts, make sure to head on over to Apple Podcasts, rate and review. Give it. We really appreciate those 5-star ratings. And if you can review, if you want to review about the show, fine. If you want to put something weird, people suck. Another good t-shirt slogan tonight, right? We've gotten some good t-shirt slogans or potentially good reviews out of it. We would really appreciate it all because it just helps us climb up. We're all over the socials now. My God, our RaShaun, our social magnet, our social media magnet here.
It's all you, Birdman. It's all your memes that you're posting, Birdman, not me.
Memes are killing it.
Yeah,
you've got us on Twitter though, right? What are we on Twitter now?
We are the Steam G's.
The Steam G's.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is GS, no apostrophe.
Okay, Steam G's and TikTok. We're the Steam Gentlemen, right? For what those fun videos. 2 more tonight.
2 more tonight. Yeah, that's right. Dropping like hotcakes.
There we go. We got that. We
dropping
are
dropping like 90s mixtapes in NYC, baby. This is where you get that killer cam,
Beastie Boys
that
style.
early 50 Cent right here. That's what you get.
Love it. Love it. We are on Facebook. We're the Steam Gentlemen Podcast. We're on Instagram. Do you even steam, bro? We're out there. We're trying. We're hustling. We're doing all that great stuff. But Amelia, we can't thank you enough for coming on tonight. We really do appreciate it. Have you got anything nice going on for the rest of your weekend?
No, just working.
She's a hard worker too. By the way, a restaurateur, a vegan restaurateur at a cafe in Wellesley, Crepeberry. Fantastic crepes, excellent coffee. You really got me drinking more black coffee. So good on you. Just as far as to appreciate the taste of it. I still, midday got to cut it with a little milk sometimes. Make sure to keep the old acid reflux down, but got to keep the caffeine coming in. Let's just make sure that we're doing that. But fantastic, you are hiring too as well. So
yes,
a lot of our listeners are here in the Massachusetts area. So come on down, learn how to flip some crepes. Make some, as well as you do acai bowls too, or
yep,
acai bowls, smoothies. It's a great place. I've been there, have eaten there, and I always personally thank you, Amelia, because really without Amelia, the Steam Gentlemen never get together, because Amelia started her podcast. Amelia started her podcast before I did, and when I was got this idea in the head, and then took it to Greg and then RaShaun, who nailed it with the concept. I started asking you all kinds of questions. I was like, how do we do this?
And weren't you surprised at how easy it was?
It really was. I was pleasantly surprised and very happy with that. It was everything I wanted it to be. But RaShaun, 3 clubs, what you taking us out into the weekend with?
A personal life mantra of mine in relation to the topic of hand, which is I hate humans, love humanity.
Beautiful. And you have said that before. So call back to earlier episodes. All right.
That's
Star
a meme.
Child. Star Child, what you got for us there?
I'm just gonna try to survive the rest of the weekend, and now um, gonna watch Fog of War, and probably listen to Billie Holiday.
All right, you took all that to heart, especially with the try and survive the rest of the weekend. So we
Why
know
not?
it's exactly.
There's probably a new documentary about her too. So
that's very true.
there's
All
a
right,
documentary about everything.
there is. I mean,
I mean, the world is a big place, and stuff happens on it, like a lot of stuff. And you can make a documentary about fucking hell anything on that, right? I mean, you literally can. So yeah, this is just the tip of the iceberg. You're gonna make documentaries about every single thing that's ever happened.
Well, that's why I said rubbernecking, because anyone can get into a car accident. And I think that's the most salient point about these true crimes is no matter how nice of a person you think you are or how evil you think you are, we're watching stories where, frankly, you can kind of put yourself in their shoes at least one step of the way. With that said, Josh, you're not getting out of here unscathed. What are you up to for the rest of the weekend, as well as you, Amelia?
Oh, I will be heading back. I, like Amelia, will be working a little bit tomorrow, so got to get back to that grind. Till all you fine listeners here can just boost us up and lift us into our new career, hawking erectile dysfunction pills and purple mattresses. Which, by the way, I'm totally 100% fine with. I mean, I can absolutely sleep just fine at night.
Let's not act like Andy Van Slyke is doing something better.
So I'm absolutely fine. So yeah, back to the start of my grind. I do a Sunday through Thursday work week. I keep a nice Jewish schedule, even though I'm really not observant at all. And I'll be eating bacon and coming home to my shiksa wife the entire time. So everything's gonna be fine there. Yay! We're all good there. But Amelia, thank you so much for coming back on. We really appreciate it. We hope to have you back on again sometime. Good luck to you and all of your endeavors and everything we just mentioned there. So check out her podcast. Go check out her Greg Do It All. And this is Josh, the Birdman, who's telling you to keep your heat up and keep your head of steam on.